Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad to be back. I got a call about 2 months ago from Atul Tandon and said, would you consider coming back to Opportunity? And I really wanted to, and I'd been thinking about that for the 3 years that I was gone, but I didn't want to sound too excited to Atul. I said, well, think about it. There's some conditions that you'd have to fulfill for me, but actually I knew as soon as he asked that I was going to come back. I started in 1992, and I remember talking to our CEO at that time. He was telling me we have 7,000 businesses financed around the world, and I was astounded. There's a company in Chicago that is financing 7,000 businesses around the world, and of course you've heard the numbers now. It's probably closer to 9 million clients who've had a loan from Opportunity currently outstanding. So it's been a remarkable run, and I'm glad to come back with Opportunity 2.0. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to come up. We're going to talk about Asia. Oh, here they are. Somebody in the back running the sound system said, people are going to be a little tired at this time of the day, so you're really good at telling bad jokes. So if you could do that a couple times, perhaps we could keep people alive. Well, I quickly went to our panel and delegated that to them. I want them to say one outrageous thing and then one bad joke. Have you guys, are you prepared for the bad joke and the outrageous thing? Whatever. Okay, good. Sounds good. Well, I'm really excited about the panel. Glad to be back. Let me introduce our panel to you. Rosa, Wang. It's interesting. I think this is your third panel, or is it your fourth?
It's the third.
It's the third. Okay. And there's a reason behind that, and I think she's going to tell you about the exceptionally critical value of technology in a lot of things that we do. And when we realized that technology could help in terms of reducing walk time to branch offices for our clients, but also dramatically reduce the cost of transactions for our banks, we realized we needed to find somebody who was the best in the world at this, or who could become the best in the world at it, to guide us to unleash technology for our clients. And so we found Rosa. So we're really glad that you're on board. I think your title right now is Director of Digital Financial Services. So we're glad you're on this panel. Next we have Rob Dunn. Rob was the Executive Director of Opportunity Australia. Opportunity Australia was famous for what I would call unauthorized outbreaks of innovation. And this was typically what would happen in Australia, and they wouldn't tell us what was actually going on until we learned how magnificent it was. And you're going to be hearing about the India story, and that was unauthorized. It was an outbreak, but I'm glad you did it.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I know. Well, what you were able to do was create a paradigm for our expansion in other parts of the world. And we're glad that you took that leap of faith to do something a little different, which allowed us to reach millions of more people. So thank you. Finally, well, I should say that Rob is now Executive Director of Opportunity Global. So he's responsible for many of the staff and the program units that we have around the world, building our finance companies and our partnerships. Saneesh is the CEO of Vikas. That's Opportunity International's partner in India. Saneesh works with an extensive network of microfinance institutions, banks, credit unions, actually to reach and train millions of people in India. Saneesh, how many states are there in India?
29.
And how many states are we working in?
26.
26 states out of 29. Remarkable. And how many current clients do we have that we're reaching?
Well, just through credit, we are reaching 4.8 million.
4.8 million clients.
Yeah, and another 7 million through savings and other services.
Okay.
So total unique outreach will be more than 11 million.
More than 11 million. It's a little bit of an increase. So can somebody find out the compound annual growth rate from 7,000 clients to this many just in India? It's remarkable. So we're glad you're here. And it's part of what Rob did in unleashing this creativity that nobody knew about that resulted in this remarkable expansion of our work in India. So I've got some questions for you guys. You're working very, very creatively. You've done a lot of different things. I would be really interested in what you see as an innovative program or initiative that you're most excited about right now. You want to go first, Rob?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So, interestingly, despite the fantastic microfinance program that Saneesh oversees with his team, and dear Vikas' opportunity in India, it's our company in India, so think of it that way. I'm not going to talk about microfinance as my interesting, innovative thing. I'm going to talk about what Larry talked about and what Jeff referred to, Jeff from Amway, and Roger as well, which is the Community Health Leaders Program, and it was in the video. And this is when we started this program, or working with this program, people in Australia said, "You've lost the plot. You're about microfinance. You shouldn't be doing health. You don't know anything about health. What are you doing with health?" And the answer was simple. We're not there for microfinance. We're there to get people, to help people move out of poverty, move themselves out of poverty. And if being sick is the blocker to that, and in North India, being sick is what everyone is because of the state of the water and the lack of sanitation, then that has to be dealt with. So we found a great NGO in India, introduced that NGO to our biggest partner at the time, which Saneesh is on the board of, Kashpur, based in northern India. And to us, the microfinance business was a distribution platform for other social services that we don't do, like health, but Healing Fields knows about health. So why is this an exciting program? And why are people like Amway backing this with innovative entrepreneurial experiments and whatnot? Because I've never seen people change so much as the community health leaders. Now, the clients in northern India are, if you think about the Indian caste system and you think about low and scheduled caste people, and then think about rural women, well, I might be out on a limb here, but I'd say that you're pretty much in the non-human space at this point. A low caste rural woman, pretty much in the non-human space. So to see a community health leader get up at the end of a loan meeting and educate 20 or 30 women on good health behaviours without notes, she's talking confidently, she is a leader in her community, that's a distance of empowerment that I've never seen anywhere else. And if that's what opportunity is about, and I think it is, it's change, it's bringing full life, it's helping people flourish who were otherwise not flourishing. I think that's a perfect example. So that program has trained 4,160 community health leaders. They've taught nutrition, hygiene, sanitation, first aid, access to government services like hospitals, these sort of things to roughly 200 to 250 families each. Just over 1 million people in the north of India now have that behaviour. You see the difference when you go. You now see toilets where there were no toilets. You see the difference. And that program has now been brought to Indonesia. There's 54 community health leaders now trained in Indonesia and growing. So that's my exciting program. It's the microfinance business as a distribution platform for other essential development services.
Thanks, Rob. Saneesh, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, so over the past roughly 10 years, India has halved the number of extreme poor. And we now have 271 million lesser people in extreme poverty. However, the number of people who remain in extreme poverty is a similar number. So another 270 roughly to go. And by 2030, we need to do it. So the program which excites me, and this cannot be done by the way we have been doing so far, we need to use innovative ways, technology to achieve this, last lap to push extreme poverty into museums. The program which excites me most is called the India Stack. And the India Stack is basically a cutting edge technology platform which has a number of components, right from biometric identification of a person to a bank account which is linked to the biometric, to payment gateways, again linked, to payment banks and the entire financial infrastructure of the company and country, and something called unified payment interface, where money can flow seamlessly from anything to anywhere, from credit card to a bank account to a payment account to anywhere it can, to a vendor. It can go using that biometric and all these enabling technologies. And the other components are mobiles, which where the penetration of mobile is very high in India, like in Africa. Using all these components, the India Stack has been developed, and we are seeing digital finance as a, and Rosa, I'm sure, is going to speak about it, as that potent tool which is going to enable us to reach that last mile and to reach, and to put poverty in museums.
Wow.
So that's what excites me a lot. And we want to use this more and more. The partners we have in India, we have 14. Vikas is an investment company. We are a social investor, and we have 14 investees, partners, or whatever you may call them. And they are increasingly using these technologies. They are driving down costs for the clients. And the lowest cost which has been achieved right now is 18% to the ultimate client, to the final client. That has been enabled through the use of these technologies. And we look at more efficiencies being built in the future and more choices being provided to the clients.
I love it. When you say biometrics, is that thumbprint or photographs or?
Yeah, so it is the thumbprints as well as iris scans.
Iris scans.
Yeah. So the program is called Aadhaar, where out of the 1.34 billion population of India, 1.24 roughly have this biometric identification already, and I mean, everyone will be covered under that.
Great.
It's a government program.
It's a government program.
They just made it happen.
That's a way to do it, yeah. So Rosa, what are you most excited about?
So to give you the context of this, I have to take you to when I was approaching this from the standpoint of Opportunity. So I'd been with Opportunity for 3 years. In Africa, we had installed mobile cell phone banking in 4 countries in Africa. We had also launched 2 agent networks, which are basically distributed systems so that individuals, instead of branches and instead of ATMs, could be used as sort of human ATMs. And we had this all set up, and then the leadership said, Rosa, you really need to turn your attention to Asia. You've heard the numbers that Saneesh has said. There's some wonderful partners there, and really look at it. And so in the scoping trip that I did in 2016, and I had taken a break for about 4 years from India, so I hadn't been there. My previous work, I did quite a lot of work, but it had been 4 years, and in that time was really when the National ID program had sort of flourished. So I was really encouraged about what I would see. But it struck me, I went to one trip with one of our partners who's in Bhopal, and this is one where the CEO is a woman, and she took my hand, and we were joining a group, and she said, come sit on the floor with the women. And it was very much a similar experience to what Leanne said, where I felt very privileged to be able to sit and listen and to hear their stories. And because the CEO is a woman, and she realized with men present, the women may not share as much, she handed our bags to the male staff that were there and told them to exit the room. So it was an interesting experience. But I engaged the women, and I wanted to know what was the status of things. This was a scoping trip. And I asked them, do you have your own mobile cell phone? And about 20, or do you have a mobile cell phone? About 20% of the women, said yes, which was lower than what I thought. And so I said, well, do you have one in your household? And every woman said, oh yeah, in the household we have one. And this is more of an urban area. It's an area where connectivity was not an issue. The masts have been invested in and built. And so I said, okay, well, are you allowed to use this phone? I was very specific about the language. And the women were like, I don't know how. And then I said, well, okay, but surely you must call your sister from time to time. How do you do that? And then some of the women said, someone has to help me. Okay. And so I realized that the programs that we had in Africa and the context that I had been immersed with before that we had to go even further and even deeper to be able to reach these women. And we had to really recognize that, and there is a study by CGAP that shows to have a woman who's never been to school, never been exposed to numbers, to try to teach her to memorize a 4-digit PIN, which was the key to the security access we were using in the African program, was nearly impossible. And it took several trainers, deeply seasoned in the field, 3 days in order to get them to be able to memorize a 4-digit PIN. And so we really had to rethink this. And so this was quite challenging. But on this same trip, I also went into Bihar, which is one of the most patriarchal, poorest places within India. And there we had a partner that had launched agents. And I was tasked to go and actually see, what is really going on. And frankly, I think there was a lot of skepticism because this was our smallest partner from the standpoint of loan clients. And we went into the field and I said, I don't want anything staged. I want this to be very natural and organic. I want to see what's going on. We waited until a client came. And a woman arrived, and she had never been to school. She couldn't write her own name. She places her thumbprint on one of these thumbprint readers, and up pops the information to an agent about her account onto a tablet. And then he asks the woman, what do you want? And then she gives him an amount of money, and he hands her the cash. And what had happened with this is that in many of the states, they have shifted the welfare payments that are given to electronic accounts. These women have, because of this government program, registered their 10 fingerprints plus iris scan. And so despite the fact that this woman cannot sign her own name, she is able to offer her fingerprint. She has her identity. And through that identity, she now gets the benefits that she's entitled to. And if you think of the social context that is the subtext of what we're saying, if something had happened to this previously, how were these welfare payments paid out? They were in sacks of cash by the village chieftain. And in those cases, probably given to her husband. And if that household had broken up and say the husband had left her, she would have nothing. And now if that same thing, unfortunate thing happened and the husband were to leave her, she would at least have the benefits she was entitled to. And that's when, we talk about sort of the light bulb moment or the penny dropping moment. That was when the penny dropping moment for me happened, and I said, okay, this sort of big, hairy, audacious goal of ending extreme poverty, we can do it. We can do it because we are granting people an identity, and because people own their own identity, they can get what they are entitled to. And so even though the context is very different, and people have often said, oh, Rosa, what you're doing in Africa, we don't have cell phone usage in that way in India. And it's like, okay, this is my rule number one. What's one of the best way to solve a problem? Avoid it. So we're skipping that entirely. And you've heard about the leapfrog situation. This is very much saying, probably in this area, cell phones by these women might take a very, very long time. Let's just skip it. But let's build on the infrastructure that the partners have done, that the government has done, and all of these things. And let's recognize that we can actually have this big, hairy, audacious goal of ending extreme poverty.
Wow, thank you. I like that philosophy of just avoiding and leapfrogging. That's good. Saneesh, I know you've told us about the numbers that you're reaching in India, but there are a lot more families and people who need access to financial services and the type of programs that Rob is talking with the community health workers. What are some of the barriers? I know, tell us first of all, what could you see maybe 5 or 10 years down the road in the scope and scale of what Dia Vikas and Opportunity could be doing in India? And then what are the barriers that you see in that regard?
So right now, DIA reaches out. I mean, our program basically broadly is 10% of India's, microfinance
10%.
market. Yeah, we are 10%. In terms of saving accounts, it will be slightly higher, but broadly we can take this figure, it's 10%. And over the next 5 years, we want to definitely cross 20%. So that's what I'm believing that we will be reaching there. And to reach there, apart from just the technology I spoke about, which is going to be a great enabler, there will have to be investments of capital in our partners to enable them to leverage further and achieve this goal.
So from 10% of the extreme poor, you want to double that for Vikas.
Yeah, of the entire microfinance market in India.
Yeah.
Currently we are
That's
10, but
amazing.
we want to double it.
Mm-hmm.
At least we want to double it over the next 5 years. And it's very humbling and I feel proud that we will be contributing to ending of extreme poverty.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've mentioned this unauthorized outbreak of innovation on behalf of Opportunity Australia. The model adopted for India when they looked at the size of the problem, they looked at the fact that we had 2 fairly small microfinance institutions. We knew we were just not going to be able to do what Saneesh has been able to do by working through 2 fairly small microfinance institutions. And so the model was to find some of the best-in-class microfinance institutions across the country, or those who are on the cusp of becoming best-in-class and who could take capital and technical assistance to help them grow. And it was a very powerful model. Rob, did you want to?
Sure. Look, it's sort of, God bless this work. We didn't really have, we had plans and whatnot, but Saneesh reminded me today that not only when we started did we angel fund half a dozen people, there were 5 guys and 1 woman who came as leaders of prospective microfinance organizations. There was 1 plan among the 6 of them. You can guess who had the plan. We sent the 5 guys off to a consultant to develop a plan. And then we gave them all money. They all worked. We didn't expect that. And everyone else we came alongside, we were the first investor. So they may have started already and grown as a society or whatnot, but they were morphing into something bigger, and we were the first investor. Now, you can say blessed, you can say lucky, you can say whatever, but it just worked. It needed to be big. We're not proud about the numbers, but here's the context. If extreme poverty in the world is a village of 100 people, 51 of the 100 are Africans. 44 are Asians. Of the 44, 29 live in India. It's 2.5 times bigger population of extreme poverty than the next biggest country, which is Nigeria, and then comes the Congo. So it's a big part of the problem, and so we needed it was, as Saneesh said, it was no good just sort of messing about, well, you said, no good messing about. We needed something, but we're not there to fix it all, and one of the things that keeps ringing in my mind when we talk these last couple of days about ending extreme poverty, you all know, we're in the group ending extreme poverty. Opportunity is not doing this by ourselves. We're not going to do it in India by ourselves. That would be a pathway to pride, I guess. But we are in that movement. And the way I look at this is, what can I do to be obedient, to help bring new kingdom values, a picture of people flourishing where they were struggling, life in all its fullness, if you like, John 10:10. That's the model, that's the driver. And so in India, we did it through investing minority investments in good operators. Best in class is right, potential best in class. Not everything worked. We had a few failures. If you want to talk about it later, I'll go through it. Probably won't spend the time now. But you know, nothing is easy in this stuff. And the same applies in Indonesia and the Philippines. So in Indonesia, we have about 900, we have 4 partners that serve 900,000 clients. Indonesia, I don't know if you know the geography of Indonesia, but if you overlay Indonesia across the US, it doesn't fit. It goes out both sides. It's longer than the US. It is incredibly difficult geography. It's thousands of islands, and the further away from Jakarta, the less connected you are with power. It's Jakarta and everything else. It's Java and everything else. And so we have partners right across in the eastern side where it's hardly, from time to time, there's no economy. And microfinance was done in food. You lent food and you received food back because there's no economy now. That partner's now 68,000 clients. Now that's a 30-year journey with that partner. That's walking with. There's nothing easy about that. But we have now 4 partners in Indonesia. They have 900,000 clients. They're growing at 30% per annum. Organic growth, it's the same as what's in India. It's going. Now, it should be. This is number 5 in the world list of partners. 3 of our 100 in the village live in Indonesia. That's 25 million people in extreme poverty, coincidentally, the population of Australia. We get 1 each. It's our nearest neighbour. It's where more Australians holiday than any other country. I would love you guys to come on board in Indonesia. That is it's so difficult. You read about tsunamis, you don't read about every year natural disasters. Every year natural disasters in the Philippines. Typhoon season is a season in the Philippines. That's what's hard. Weather is making this incredibly hard. Climate change is making this incredibly hard. Somebody asked me what was my politics on climate change. Climate change is making this incredibly hard. The answer is digital. This is why Rosa's on every panel. Yeah, now, you might have remembered John Magnay saying, he came, looked at India, it was very productive. We said, yeah, we don't need you here, John. Go back to Africa, work there. You know what? Now we need to focus on agriculture in India. Why? Because crops will fail. Because rains will not come. People need to know the latest information on weather. How are they going to know? Because they've got a cell phone. How are they going to know? Because they've got the government-imposed personal Dropbox account called a DigiLocker. It's part of the India stack. You should Google the India stack. It's the weirdest thing that's happening on the planet, I reckon. A whole country digitized by government. In the DigiLocker can be algorithms. You could walk into, this is what John does and Tim do in Africa. You could walk into a store and you don't farm an acre, you farm slightly different to an acre. It'll have in your record what you grow, what seeds you grow, what pesticides you've applied, what fertilizer you should apply. Is it going to rain next week? Where should you sell your product? This market or this market? Nobody has any of that information at the moment. It's all potluck. But it could be, you fast forward 5 years, we ought to be the cutting edge of that. Jack Ma will not do that in Asia. Alibaba will not solve that problem in Asia. They will solve the middle class digital connections in the cities. And if you live out in the village over the hill, the digital divide, despite unless we do what we do, and even then we need to get a few others on board with us, the digital divide will divide these countries and people will be left behind. But we can make that difference. The high tech, high touch that Rosa talks about, high impact.
I think that's the key issue. People often ask me what are the big challenges, and they're expecting a technology answer. And if you go to India, you'll see some of our partners with some of the most sophisticated technologies, like you saw the pictures of our partner in Kerala that's using iris scan. I think it's probably second to CERN after the use of iris scan in terms of access to your accounts. So we have a good team there, and if you think about it, most people here probably are outsourcing or are the recipient of outsourced things to India. So there is talent to address the technology issues. For me, the challenges are issues of culture. Things about women, gender issues are quite severe in many states. It does differ quite a lot. And issues of things like attitude. Many of the women do not yet feel confident enough to engage in some of these things. Issues like stigma. You have a lot of these things. And so as we chip away, I think it's really important to see and understand that the work that we're doing is very complex. And although it has a digital framing around it, that the work I was describing to someone earlier, much of the work that I do looks a lot more like anthropology. It's, you know, when we do training exercises for the staff so that they can deliver things to the client, we do exercises in empathy. And we try to get the staff to understand if you've never been to school, think about how intimidated you will be to try something for the first time. And that's where we're starting to make inroads, and that's where we're starting to get a lot of these village women on board, is in terms of addressing some of the human issues. So as Rob said, the tagline is high tech, high touch, and then ultimately high impact.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, and I think we could go on for a couple of more hours. I wish you guys were more passionate about this type of work, but I think about both passion, and I've worked with all three of these folks, and they're passionate and relentless. They're never satisfied with where we're at now, and they're in it for the long haul. So I'm proud to be part of this team and coming back and finding out what's been happening over the last 3 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And now it's my